voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, it's Friday, January 29th. Don Lemon has been squeezed by the feds. Trump has named Kevin Warsh as his nominee for chairman of the Federal Reserve, and we are tracking the possibility of a government shutdown today. This is Scott Jennings, Common Sense for the American People. I am on the mend. Thanks to Jen Horn for filling in for me yesterday, and thank you so much to everyone for tuning in as we close out the first month of our new 2-hour show here on Salem. In January alone, we had the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, dozens of members of Congress, administration officials, pundits, and writers. And most importantly, we had you, the listener. You have made us the fastest growing radio news program in all of America. So thank you for supporting Common Sense for the American people. At 33 minutes past the hour today, my good friend Rich Lowry from the National Review joins us to discuss the news of the day. And in our second hour, we have our traditional Friday punditry with Rob Bluey and also the one and only Officer Brandon Tatum joining us from Arizona. But first, lots of breaking news today. This morning, the president announced his new pick for Fed chairman. Kevin Warsh is him. If confirmed, he'll replace Jerome Powell, whose term as chair ends in May. Warsh is a former member of the Fed board, and he spent years in the private sector. His nomination is earning praise from across the spectrum. Markets like it. And now we'll see what questions await him in his confirmation process. North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis has pledged to hold any Fed nominee over the DOJ's recent subpoena sent to Jerome Powell. We'll see how that plays out. Also breaking this morning, and while you slept last night, the FBI arrested former CNN News anchor Don Lemon in Beverly Hills, California. Lemon was indicted by a federal grand jury for being part of an angry mob that stormed a Minneapolis Baptist church the other day. Lemon is charged with conspiracy against rights as well as violating the FACE Act. We'll keep you posted as this story develops, but as Don Lemon himself once told us all, cut 12.
Nobody is above the law. Nobody's above the law.
Democrats and folks on the left are melting down over this arrest. Lemon casting himself as a journalist and therefore untouchable. It seems to me that the position of the left in America right now is that if you're holding a cell phone or any kind of a camera, you can break any law that you want on First Amendment grounds. That's what they say about these radical agitators in Minnesota. Oh, well, look, he was holding a cell phone. Doesn't he have a right to film things with a cell phone? Well, sure, but from a safe distance, not while you are simultaneously disrupting or putting your hands on federal law enforcement or kicking out the taillights of their vehicles or blocking the street. You get the picture. Holding a camera doesn't absolve you from having to follow the law. Here's how I called it on CNN last night, cut 13.
The word impede don't people in America have the constitutional right to protest? Yes or no?
Yes. They do. I would just point out to you, though, that in a court case in Minnesota this week, there was a district court ruling that was overturned by the 8th Circuit. And the panel of the 8th Circuit said they had reviewed hours and hours of footage from all these supposed protests. And even though some people were doing protected speech and protected protests, that much of the time it crossed the line, that it was not protest activity. So it's not all just protesting. Some of it is crossing the line. Some of it is designed to impede federal law enforcement, and that is a crime, is it not? Yeah.
Protesting is one thing. Violating people's rights, storming churches, impeding federal law enforcement is quite another. All of this political vigilanteism that has emerged on the left was predictable. Last July, there was a news article in Axios with the following headline, quote, "There needs to be blood." Democrat voters tell them to get shot in Trump resistance push. The article stated that Democratic voters wanted their representatives to break the rules, fight dirty, and not be afraid to get hurt. Even getting shot, they asked for. Let me repeat the demands of the Democratic base. There needs to be blood. And that's what they've gotten, isn't it? With the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, whatever you think of the conduct of federal officers in these incidents, the radicalized Democratic base, in fact, got its wish. There has been blood on the streets of Minneapolis. Mission accomplished, I suppose. And people like Minnesota Governor Tim Walz are more than happy to keep the blood flowing. Walz has told The Atlantic magazine this week that he believes what's happening in Minneapolis is a modern-day Fort Sumter. You know, the place where the first shots of the American Civil War were fired. Although mainstream media has largely ignored Walz's comments, which were made in a very public way to The Atlantic, I informed the panel about it last night on CNN. Here's cut 5.
Well, wait, I have to say,
yes.
He said today that he thought maybe this was like the next Fort Sumter. And when Governor Walz said that, and previously he had referenced the Battle of Gettysburg. And so when I hear that kind of language coming out of a governor, this sort of fantasizing about an American Civil War, first of all, I don't think he stopped to consider who that makes him in this entire endeavor. Jefferson Davis, spoiler alert. And number two, if you wanted more calm, if you wanted a little bit more cooperation, if you wanted to ratchet things down, you would not be referencing the first shots of the Civil War and maybe thinking that we're in the middle of another one. You agree or disagree?
We don't want to get into a debate about political rhetoric, I don't think, because there's too much.
Do you like the Fort Sumter language?
I don't like it, but I don't like a lot of things that I hear in our political atmosphere. But I just constantly am baffled by when it is directed at conservatives, they suddenly want to clutch their little pearls. And then when they constantly egg and ramp up the...
So you do like it?
No, I don't like it at all. But what I'm saying is...
So are you clutching your own
No, what I'm saying is call it on both sides, which I'll never do. See, you only want to react.
But then,
because like you want to pearl clutch on that side, but when your side doesn't...
I don't wear pearls.
You don't want to...
Are you clutching your own pearls?
I will clutch his necklace. Can I give it?
Now, previously, Walz had encouraged his radical base to fight like they were at Gettysburg. Now he's invoking Fort Sumter. I used to call this man a buffoon, but it is apparent that he is clearly simply deranged, openly fantasizing about a new American Civil War, and he's casting himself as the Confederacy, I guess. Democrats, I suppose, haven't really changed all that much since the 1860s. Everything the left has claimed about Republicans. They violate people's rights. They are modern-day Confederates. They caused an insurrection. Well, it seems that they themselves have come to embody all of those things. Don Lemon clearly violated the civil rights of the people in that church. It's on tape, really no question about it. And Tim Walz, joined by more than a handful of other Democrats in and out of Minnesota, are clearly wanting to spark a national insurrection against the federal government. This is the modern left. They want blood. They want to break the rules. They want a violent confrontation, complete with casualties and an apparent break with the federal union. All because Trump is the president. And they said that Republicans were the election deniers. Give me a break. This is the Scott Jennings Show on Salem. Common sense for the American people. I have a message for you about wireless service. Here's something that most people don't realize. There is a company you can choose that actually shares your values in this space. They invest in your values, in fact. Patriot Mobile isn't just a wireless provider. They're an activist organization that is funded by selling top-tier cell phone service. They stand in the gap where other companies will not. And Patriot Mobile delivers prioritized premium service on all 3 major U.S. networks, giving you the same or even better coverage. Get unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, and more with Patriot Mobile. And when you switch to Patriot, you'll help grow a movement that fuels the Christian conservative cause. Every bill that you pay helps advance the values of faith, family, and freedom. Switching is easier than ever. You can activate in minutes. You can keep your number. You can keep your phone, or you can upgrade, whatever you want. I just want you to take a stand today. Go to patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT and use promo code SCOTT and they'll give you a free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. Make the switch today. This is Scott Jennings on Salem. When we come back, a case of you get the government that you vote for in Virginia, where Democrats are planning to inflict massive tax increases on the Commonwealth. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Hey, it's Scott. I want to talk to you about our friends at Balance of Nature. You can find them, by the way, at balanceofnature.com. They have this thing called the Balance of Nature Whole Health System. These supplements are perfect for a resolution in the new year. It's kind of tough to stick with New Year's resolutions, and that's why Balance of Nature's Whole Health System supplements are one of the easiest ways to do it. They're very versatile. You do 2 scoops of fiber and spice and mix it easily into drinks, and it adds a warm, aromatic depth. You can also open 3 of your fruit supplements and mix the powder into a smoothie, or sprinkle 3 of the veggie supplements over one of the savory dishes that you're having for dinner. It's called Balance of Nature's Whole Health System. These supplements include 47 ingredients of 100% whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers, perfect for your daily routine. 50% off if you do it now for 1 year when you subscribe to the Whole Health System from our friends at Balance of Nature. Get it at balanceofnature.com.
The man who made CNN safe for conservatives again. Here's Scott Jennings.
Welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show. Friday, January 30th. Cold day here in New York. Cold all week, actually. I was reading about the aquarium in Long Island, by the way. They had to literally bring the penguins at the aquarium inside. It's too cold, even for the penguins here in New York City. How are the rest of us supposed to function if the penguins can't even do it? All right, more news today. Remember what you were told in November when Democrats won governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, that these Democrats, the so-called moderates, were laser focused on affordability? Well, let's see how that's going, shall we? Tomorrow marks 2 full weeks into new Governor Abigail Spanberger's reign in Virginia. How is the affordability agenda progressing over there? Let's listen to Cut 4.
Here's a list of the many tax increases and proposals Democrats in Virginia are considering passing. They include additional local sales tax in all Virginia counties and cities, new personal property tax on electric leaf blowers and electric landscaping equipment, large employer tax, gun and ammunition tax, new income tax brackets, a delivery tax. This would hit you if you make an order on Amazon, Uber Eats, or an order that includes UPS, FedEx delivery, etc. here in Northern Virginia. There's also a tax they're looking at for events, concerts, an investment income tax, storage facility tax, gym membership tax, dog walking tax, dog grooming tax, counseling tax, digital personal property tax, new car taxes and highway use fees, an increase in the hotel tax here in Arlington, statewide speed cameras. Now, these aren't taxes, but they would include more fines for some drivers, dry cleaning tax, home repair tax, and a vehicle repair tax.
Affordability. Affordability, they told us. That's WJLA-TV in Virginia with the report, by the way. But not to be outdone, the new governor in New Jersey, Mikie Sherrill, the other supposed moderate, laid out her plans this week to launch a state government portal to track and report the location of ICE agents. Let's hear from the new governor there, cut number 7.
I've already met with AG. We are putting out information on helping New Jerseyans know their rights. We are not going to allow any ICE raids to be staged from state properties. And we are also going to be standing up a portal so people can upload all their cell phone videos and alert people. Like if you see an ICE agent in the street, get your phone out.
Yes.
We want to know. Affordability. It's funny, she was making that announcement on Comedy Central. It would be funny if it weren't so tragic. You realize here, by the way, that a governor of a state, New Jersey, is literally using public money to create a public tracking system so that people can go out and attack federal law enforcement, right? I mean, that's the purpose of this. Ask yourself this, by the way. What if someone, anyone, created a public tracker to track the minute-by-minute movements of the governor or any other public official. Hey, here they are. Come get them. I mean, that person, if they did that, would be labeled a domestic terrorist and tossed in jail. So what makes this different? Nothing, in my opinion. These, by the way, are the affordability Democrats, raising your taxes, creating state-funded mechanisms by which you can plan your next attack on federal law enforcement. None of this has anything to do with affordability. All of it has everything to do with pleasing the radical base of the Democratic Party. Virginia really is something else. Tax after tax after tax after tax. By the time they levy all these taxes in Virginia, Virginia will be one of the highest tax states in the country. We've seen what happens when tax burdens get so high in these blue states. People leave. It's all completely insane. Terrible politics and terrible policy, but you get what you vote for, don't you? You buy the narrative. Oh, they're about affordability. Oh, these are the moderates. If you buy into the narratives, you get what you deserve if you cast those votes. When we come back, Rich Lowry of the National Review is here to kick around the news of the week. We'll talk about Don Lemon being arrested. We'll get the latest on Minneapolis, and we'll talk to Rich about whether we are facing a possible government shutdown. Lindsey Graham is holding up the process now. There was a supposed deal. Lindsey Graham has some things he wants put into the Senate bill. We'll check in with Rich about all that. It's more common sense for the American people when we come back. You're listening to the Scott Jennings Show right here on Salem. Friday, January 30th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here, broadcasting live from New York City today. We have some breaking news into the Scott Jennings Show. Sad news, actually. Actress Catherine O'Hara has passed away at the age of 71. Legendary Hollywood actress, maybe best known as the mom in Home Alone. Catherine O'Hara, 71, has passed. Joining us now, an old friend of mine here to kick around the biggest stories of the week. Rich Lowry is the editor-in-chief at National Review. You can find him on X at Rich Lowry. Rich, welcome back into the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Hey, glad to see you here today, Rich.
Those Home Alone movies stand up very well, by the way.
They really do. Great movies. Our family loves them, and she was really something else. And she was in Schitt's Creek and in some commercial. I mean, she was a really well-known person. So that's a sad development. Rich, the eyes of the nation this week have been on Minneapolis, and it feels like every day we're getting a new breaking news story, and no different today. Don Lemon, somebody that you and I both know quite well, was arrested early this morning. He was actually arrested in Beverly Hills, California, for storming into a Baptist church a couple of weeks ago in Minneapolis. What was your reaction to Don Lemon? Is this whole journalism defense going to stand up?
Yeah, so this has been pretty well forecast, and we had reporting that they tried to get an arrest warrant from a magistrate judge, didn't get it. Apparently now they have a criminal indictment. And look, I think at the very least what he did is reprehensible. I believe he broke the law and entering that church, knew what others were going to do, breaking the law and disrupting that service. And the First Amendment is no protective shield that lets you break the law. It's no protective shield against getting arrested or indicted if you've broken the law. But it will be a defense if there's an eventual trial. So my guess is he's not getting convicted for this, but he stepped over the line.
Yeah, he really did. I was talking in the top of the show today about this whole journalism defense and really the broader defense on the left right now. It seems like if you're doing anything, as long as you're holding a camera or your cell phone, the left seems to think that gives you some sort of immunity from breaking the law. They're applying the same thing to these radical protesters in Minneapolis. Oh, well, they're just filming. Well, yeah, but they're simultaneously putting their hands on federal law enforcement. They're impeding federal law enforcement activity. The simply recording something is not some great shield. I mean, what if you and I decided to, follow along with a bunch of bank robbers and go rob a bank just because we were journalists or because we were filming? It wouldn't give us some immunity if we took part in it, would it?
Yeah, someone on X pointed out, what if you're a journalist or citizen journalist and you go in with the crowd into the Capitol on January 6th and you're filming it, and you're talking to the mic.
Right.
Are they not going to arrest you because of that? Of course they would have arrested you and thrown you to the wall. And you're absolutely right about these so-called observers and monitors in Minneapolis. By and large, they're there to try to disrupt and interfere, which is the opposite of mere observation. And it's very telling that second video that's emerged of Alex Preddy. This was totally unhinged behavior, challenging a DHS guy to fight him and come and assault him, spitting at the car. Spitting is a form of assault. It's less serious against a vehicle than a person, but then he kicks the tailgate out, which is a crime. And then the supposed Gestapo, what do? They chase him and they push him down so they can get in their vehicle and leave unimpeded. They don't even arrest him. And if they had arrested him and he had been charged, he might be still with us today because he wouldn't have been doing a repeat performance on that fateful street last weekend. And he was armed both times. Just incredibly irresponsible. He was lucky something horrible didn't happen the first time around.
You know what strikes me about that video? We were just showing it there, Rich, about him, Preddy, kicking out the taillight. No Minneapolis police anywhere to be found. No local cops, no nothing. And you're right, Preddy was not arrested either by the feds or by the locals. I agree with you. Had he been arrested there or somehow cited, I don't know, maybe the next iteration doesn't happen. I tell you, one thing that's become clear is that these protesters are more than just random organic people stepping out on their front porches and filming things. There's obviously a very deep level of organization going on here. They have signal chats, they have WhatsApp groups, they have training manuals. They're obviously being well funded. It struck me, one of the things from Tom Homan's press conference, which, by the way, he was brilliant, is that he said he was aware of these. They're looking into these. I really hope the feds crack down on these highly organized disruptors because they have gone well beyond protest. The 8th Circuit this week actually said this has gone well beyond legal protesting. What do you make of all this sort of underlying organization that we see here? I mean, it's almost paramilitary in nature, the way they organize themselves, the jargon they use. I mean, it is quite intricate.
Yeah, they're calling for backup. They're alerting people where they need more resources. I consider it a low-grade, mostly nonviolent form of insurgency. This is meant to expel what they consider an occupying force, which are federal agents enforcing federal law, which is totally legitimate and obviously legal from their jurisdiction. So it's highly disturbing. And it's even more disturbing the mob seems to be winning. I highly admire Tom Homan. I think he's a big professional. I think there was a great press conference he had. But the feds are clearly taking a step back in order to lessen this activity because they've been losing. Every time they shove one of these people, even though the shove might be totally justified. And I think the words you hear most often from agents on these kind of videos is back up, back off, because they want the space because people are trying to interfere. But it doesn't play well, and I think over the last week Trump has realized that, and he obviously sent Homan there to quote unquote de-escalate. And what's the verb of the hour?
Let's talk about Homan a little bit. He did show up in Minneapolis. He did meet with Walz, and he met with Fry. He apparently struck some kind of an arrangement with the Attorney General Keith Ellison to get some cooperation on getting these ICE detainers honored in the county jails. I want to play a clip of Homan. Let's do cut number 3, and we can just talk about his press conference in general. Here's Tom Homan, the White House border czar in Minneapolis.
I also want to remember the politicians are continually attacking us. Where were they the last 4 years when the number of women and children sex trafficking went all-time high? Where were they when 250,000 Americans died from fentanyl coming across the border? Where were they when women and children are dying making that journey? Where were they when over 4,000 families making that journey died, historic record? Where were they? Not a word. Now we're just trying to respond to what happened the last 4 years and keeping this country safe. And we're arresting a lot of public safety threats, take them off the streets, which make this country safer. President Trump promised to make this country safe again. And that's what we're doing.
I like that part of the press conference, Rich, and I also like that he said, look, we're enforcing laws passed by Congress. You want to protest somebody, go protest Congress, get them to change the laws. We're just here to enforce the laws. It was that kind of matter-of-fact, sort of stick-to-the-fact stuff that showed that Homan needs to be out front more for the White House.
Yeah, he has a gruff, commonsensical voice I think is highly appealing and persuasive. Now, there's a different approach here within the administration where Homan's been on the side, let's go after the worst of the worst. That's what we have the resources to do. That's what's politically sustainable. And then we can do worksite raids and worksite enforcement to try to force more people to self-deport, which is a key aspect of this. And the other point of view that had been prevailing in Minneapolis is wide-ranging raids, not just the worst of the worst. Pick up as many people as you can. That sends a message to all illegal aliens in the country. You know, you want to leave now because you don't want Greg Bovino knocking on your door. And the problem with that message, it wasn't just targeted to illegal aliens. Everyone else could see it, and they didn't like it. So Homan is a different approach. What I fear, though, Scott, is he might be sugarcoating how much cooperation or how well these meetings are going with these officials. Because, Ellison came out, I didn't agree to anything. So if Homan can get them actually to hand over illegal aliens from the city and county jails, that'd be great. And get the cops to show up and do some of this crowd control when their mob's out of control, that would be great. And he's trying to get that. I'm not sure he will, because I think the officials there, they think there's blood in the water, and they think they can force the administration to stand down no matter what. I hope they're wrong about that, but it remains to be seen.
What did you think about Tim Walz casting himself as modern-day Jefferson Davis, saying that Minneapolis is the new Fort Sumter? He originally it was Gettysburg. Now he's backtracking. It's actually Fort Sumter. What about Walz fantasizing about Civil War, Rich?
Yeah, well, he doesn't seem to realize that he's in the position of the guys firing on Fort Sumter, on resisting legitimate federal authority and an act of de facto nullification. It's very bad. I think it's shameful. It's disgusting. But the worry has to be here is going to metastasize. You have Mikey Sherrill, new governor of New Jersey, talking about keeping a database of ICE agents so they can be tracked. So we were talking about the street network. She wants to make that official and like a government sort of operation to harass ICE. You've had similar sentiments stated by folks in Seattle. So this is defiance of federal law. It's federal agents enforcing federal law. You might not like the way they're doing it. You might think they should be nicer, but this is entirely in accord with the black and white lettering of federal statute that say if you're here illegally, you shall be detained and held until your proceeding reaches its finality. And we've gotten used to totally violating that law and ignoring it for decades and decades. And now you have these jurisdictions saying, no, you just never can enforce it. Doesn't matter if you want to or not. We're going to resist you.
Yeah, these Democrats who are trying to nullify federal law and now taking it a step further, the Mickey Sherrill public ICE tracker, the mayor of Seattle doing the same thing. And you have all these left-wing NGOs out there who are funding, sort of similar kind of tracking operations. And I was wondering in the segment prior, what if somebody set up a public tracker to follow around Democratic elected officials? I mean, if you had people out there setting up trackers and saying, this Democrat senator or this Democrat governor is going to show up at this place and this time, everybody show up and get them. And those people would be labeled domestic terrorists. They would be arrested. They would be thrown in jail immediately. And yet you have these Democrats who are, let's be honest, they want people to show up and create some kind of confrontation with this federal law enforcement. It's extremely dangerous, but it seems like that's really the demand of the Democratic base right now, and it's extremely dangerous. Our guest is Rich Lowry. He is the editor of the National Review. We're kicking around the news of the week with Rich, and we're going to keep doing that. When we come back, I do want to give you, however, a quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. I want to pass along a listener note that I thought was worth sharing. This one comes from my home Commonwealth of Kentucky. A nice lady named Eileen, who is 87 years old, wrote us and said there was a point where walking had become really difficult, and she had thought to herself, well, this is just part of getting older. But then she tried Relief Factor, and now Eileen writes us and says she's walking again. She said she's dancing around to music. Her words were simple. She has, quote, no pain. She started out taking 3 packets a day. Now she's down to 2, and she says Relief Factor has made a real difference for her. This is Eileen from Kentucky, 87 years old. And in my experience, that's what people are looking for in life. Real improvement. Not hype, but real improvement. If you've tried other things and had no success, Relief Factor may be the product for you. Try their 3-week quick start. See how your body responds. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. Ask yourself, how would it feel to be out of pain? You might get the answers from Relief Factor. More with Rich Lowry on News of the Week when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
One man standing tall against the leftist mob. Here's Scott Jennings.
Friday, January 30th. Our special guest this hour, Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review. I encourage you to subscribe to that publication. I have for many years. Rich, we appreciate your service in that venue. Rich, you're tracking the government shutdown possibility in Washington, I presume, and the Senate and the House are working to avoid it. Lindsey Graham has been holding up things a bit, and I'm just reading that Thune thinks they may get it all worked out before dinner tonight. What are you hearing the latest? Are we going to see a government shutdown, or you think they'll get it worked out?
I think we may see a very technical government shutdown if the House doesn't get it in time, but I assume the matter with Lindsey Graham will get worked out. And the problem here, Scott, is Democrats really feel as though they have the whip hand on this issue now of immigration and DHS. So they're going to cleave off DHS funding from the rest of the funding bills that need to be passed, something Republicans didn't want to do until this week. And then Democrats are going to push for so-called reforms of DHS and ICE, one of which would totally kneecap ICE, which is the idea that they'll no longer be able to rely on so-called administrative warrants issued by the agencies themselves. This is the way it's worked for decades and decades. These aren't criminal matters. Most immigration enforcement is civil enforcement, and instead have to get judicial warrants, which is meant to totally gum up the works and make it basically impossible for interior enforcement to happen. So Republicans need to resist that at all costs, and I assume they will.
Yeah, I hope they do, because this would kill, derail, absolutely end Donald Trump's stated reason for running for president in the first place, which is to get rid of illegal aliens out of the country. And so the Democrats, of course, know that. We'll see what they produce tonight and over the weekend. Was looking at some migration data from the 2025 census. I wanted to get your comment on, Rich. Net domestic migration data. This is new data from the census from July 1st of 24 to July 1st of 25. The top 10 states where people are moving, all red states. North Carolina, Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, that's the top 4. The bottom 10, with one exception, all blue states. And the bottom 3 where people are leaving, fleeing. Illinois, which lost over 40,000 people. New York, which lost over 137,000 people. And California, which lost 229,000 people. It certainly seems that policy choices have their consequences, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So you see kind of the ACC, SEC states. I don't know whether maybe those conference labels don't matter anymore because every conference is so spread out. But traditional ACC, SEC states gaining, that's a function. A lot of them have nice climates, but also they have a much more better policy mix. And New York and Illinois and California continue to adopt self-destructive policy. But California is just shocking, given how gorgeous that state is, given how many natural resources it has, that they've managed to take major steps towards ruining it and chasing people out of California, someplace that represented the American dream and the really the tradition of the middle class as we've come to understand it, started in certain respects in California. That they've ruined that is just amazing.
I've been out there more than usual lately, and it's so beautiful. And you run into people out there who love California, and they're just despondent at what California has become, and now they're chasing all their entrepreneurs out of California. It really is a travesty. Rich, we got about a minute. One final question to you. Foreign policy, still trying to figure out if Trump's going to strike Iran. He's moved a bunch of military assets into the Middle East. Do you think he'll do it? Should he do it?
He just maintains, Scott, as you know, this kind of black box deterrent capacity where no one knows, right? No one knows whether it means any given threat or not, because he can easily back off and reverse course, which he did with his initial threat during the protest against Iran. I kind of think he's going to hit him again, but who knows? Stay tuned.
I guess the question is, if you're in his position, I mean, you obviously have the military capacity to hit them. If I were in his shoes, I'd want to know, if I hit them, will the regime fall? Can you guarantee me an outcome here? Because you wouldn't want to hit them and the regime stays in power, and then all of a sudden it looks like you were ineffective, because his previous moves on Iran have all been very effective, taking out, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, or taking out the nuclear facilities. He's always been very effective against these guys, but you wouldn't want that to change. Rich Lowry is the editor of the National Review. Follow Rich on X. Subscribe to the National Review. It's a great publication, and we are grateful for your time today. Appreciate you coming by, Rich.
Thanks so much, Scott. Have a great weekend.
All right, we're wrapping up the first hour. The second hour is coming. It's time for Friday Punditry. Rob Bluey is here, and also the officer, Brandon Tatum. Don't miss it. Common Sense coming back after this on Salem. You know something? Universities are kind of a bad deal. 6 figures of debt for a bachelor's degree that signals less every year. 4 years spent navigating ideological rules instead of learning how to think. Grades inflated, standards lowered, dissent punished. We call it higher education, but it's mostly expensive daycare with a credential attached. The University of Austin, also known as UATX, is different, however. Admissions at UATX are based on test scores alone. No essays, no resumes. Nobody cares who your parents know. If you're smart enough, you're in. UATX students turned down UChicago and fled Barnard to complete a demanding great books core, including Aristotle, Shakespeare, de Tocqueville, alongside real math, science, economics, and AI. Classes are small, professors actually know your name, grades aren't padded, excellence is measured and rewarded. From day one, students work directly with top founders, investors, and institutions, building companies, doing serious research, and landing real internships. And here's the part that changes everything. There is no tuition. Thanks to private donors, every UATX student graduates debt-free. You're free to take risks, free to start companies, and free to build a life instead of paying off loans. If you want an empty credential, look elsewhere. If you want a serious education that actually prepares you to lead, apply to the University of Austin. Visit uaustin.org. That's uaustin.org.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, it's Friday, January 30, second hour of the Scott Jennings Show as we close out the week and close out the month. It's been a crazy day already. Don Lemon has been arrested, among many other things. Also, just into the Scott Jennings Show, sounds like they've released millions of files in the Epstein files that have mandated by Congress to come out. DOJ now producing millions more documents. And it sounds like one of the documents contains revelations from Jeffrey Epstein saying that Bill Gates caught sexually transmitted diseases from Russian girls and then suggested secretly slipping his wife, Melinda Gates, antibiotics. That's in the Epstein files today. It's a crazy nobody can take a day off anymore. It's crazy every day to discuss it all. Plus more. Rob Bluey, the president and executive editor of the Daily Signal, is here. Rob, my man, welcome back into the Scott Jennings Show. Thankful you're here.
Scott, it's great to see you, and I can attest that we cannot take any time off. I mean, in Donald Trump's Washington, D.C., I'll tell you, he's got us busy every moment of the day, 7 days a week.
I mean, just when you thought you might get an hour reprieve, you've got Bill Gates talking about catching STDs with Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, it's wild here. Let's start with Minneapolis today, Rob, because It seems to me, I mean, we've obviously been tracking the back and forth. Tom Homan is there, which I think, by the way, was a great move by the president. It feels like the local police have been freed up to engage a little bit. That's a good development. It seems Don Lemon's been arrested, which I'll get your thoughts on in a minute. It seems to me one of the big issues that is still hanging out there is how these radical agitators are being organized and how they're being funded, and whether anybody's going to be brought to justice on this. We have some new audio from the president. He just said this a little while ago in the Oval Office. He has confirmed that his Department of Justice is zeroing in on the people who are funding this insurrection in Minneapolis. Let's play cut 15, the president.
Pretty much, we're getting very close to it, but we know pretty much who's funding this stuff. These are paid insurrectionists, paid troublemakers. But I was elected by a landslide. I won every swing state. I won the popular vote by a lot. I won everything. And I was elected by a landslide on law and order and on strong borders. We had a border that was so bad, so open, where 25 million people came in over a period of 4 years, and now nobody comes in. Nobody even tries to come in. And I can only say, I think, we'll say it very plainly, elections have consequences.
I mean, Rob, the president is right. Elections have consequences. He made clear we were going to deport people, and now you have Democrats and radical agitators trying to nullify federal law. What say you?
Scott, absolutely, you're correct on that point. This was the animating issue of the 2024 presidential campaign, and even goes back all the way to Donald Trump's first run for the White House. If there was one issue that was most defining of his campaigns, it has been the issue of border security and immigration. No American should be surprised by what's going on right now with our federal government and the fact that they are actually enforcing immigration laws, and you have ICE and Border Patrol and others in the federal government taking up the responsibility that, quite frankly, Joe Biden failed to do. Where are all these Democrats and left-wing agitators? Where were they during Barack Obama's years when he was deporting 400,000 people a year, right? You didn't hear a peep from them, mostly, for the most part. And finally, I'm glad to hear that the president says that they're making progress on who is behind some of these operations. Obviously, there have been investigative journalists and others who have suggested the root causes and the funding for these sources. I'm sure that there are people who just turn up in Minneapolis and show up for protests, but there are clearly left-wing agitators who are organizing these events. I see them with my own eyes right here in Washington, D.C. They pop up from time to time in locations all across the city. These are not just organic protests. Clearly, there's somebody behind them.
Of course there are, and we have all kinds of evidence. And this is one thing that frustrates me about mainstream media coverage of Minneapolis right now. You get no discussion of this at all. Mainstream media portrays these people as just organic grassroots folks who've wandered out on their front porch to see what's going on and, you know, film what's happening on the sidewalk. That's not at all what's happening. But it seems like the government is taking the idea that this is effectively a paramilitary operation that's being organized and funded very seriously. Let's play cut 17. This is the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who says, yes, indeed, there is an investigation into how all this is being funded and organized. Cut 17.
Looking at a nexus of left-wing groups, this DOJ said that that's something that you guys were concerned about. Are you following money? Are you looking at a potential that all of this may be related somewhere?
I mean, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Attorney General.
Okay, Todd Blanche, a man of few words. He just says, yes, we're investigating. I'm not sure what all crimes they could be looking at here, but I really hope they stay on this. And I'm glad, Rob, and I want your comment on this, that they stayed with the idea of arresting Don Lemon, who was taken into custody overnight in Beverly Hills, California. He claims he's a journalist. What do you think?
Yeah, well, he was, perhaps when he was working for CNN, but clearly I think what he was doing in this particular case in Minneapolis was serving as more of an activist than a journalist. And based on the video footage that he was recording prior to the incident at City's Church and things that he had said over the course of the previous weeks and even subsequently, clearly Don Lemon was not behaving in the way that a typical reporter might, who was embedded with the situation that eventually disrupted the church service, left children and parents frightened, and really prevented those who were at church on that morning to worship Jesus Christ as they intended to do. And so I'm glad to see that the administration is holding him accountable. We'll ultimately see how this plays out in a court of law. But let's not forget that this was a grand jury that approved this indictment. So it's not that this was just some rogue actor that decided to go after Don Lemon. No, this actually went through the legal process as it should have. And so I know that those on the left and those that were probably supporters of Don Lemon will react with hysteria, as they so often do. But I'd also like to point out, where were all these voices when Andy Ngo was arrested, or Steve Baker, or when Joe Biden's White House kicked the Daily Signal out of the White House press briefing room in 2023? Not a peep. And so it's such hypocrisy on their part.
That's Rob Bluey. He is the editor-in-chief of the Daily Signal, joining us for a little Friday punditry and commentary. Rob, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to shift gears to Venezuela. You had a conversation this week with the head of the opposition, Machado, in Venezuela. I want to get your impressions of that conversation, among other things. I also want to talk to you about the tax increases that are coming to you as a Virginian, thanks to these Democrats who won the election out there. We are going to take a break, and we're going to start with a word from our friends at Child Help. I want to tell you a story about a situation that Child Help sees all too often. It starts as a game, kids logging on after school, talking with their friends, having fun, then someone else joins in. At first, it doesn't feel wrong. It's just compliments, curious questions, someone paying attention. But over time, the messages get personal, then private, then secret, and then uncomfortable. This is called online grooming. It doesn't happen with overt force, but with the building of trust. And by the time a child realizes that something is wrong, they get scared. They get too scared to tell their parents, scared they'll be in trouble. They don't want to lose their devices or their friends. And this is where Child Help steps in. Child Help's life-saving programming focuses on prevention, education, intervention, and treatment. It helps kids recognize grooming behavior before it turns into abuse. Child Help is somebody that I support. I know them. The truth is, every family is vulnerable, and your support makes the programs possible. Just $27 can protect one child. My advice is text the word Child Help to 94878. Give them $27 and save one child. You can also donate online, childhelp.org/Scott. More with Rob Bluey when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Ready for more common sense? Here's CNN's senior political commentator, New York Times best-selling author, and America's favorite political pundit, Scott Jennings.
Friday, January 30th. Track of the news here at the Scott Jennings Show. This just in. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, has signed a law overhauling the nation's oil sector. This, according to Fox News, that opens the oil sector there to privatization. This move reverses a core policy of the socialist movement that has ruled the country for more than 2 decades. My guest is Rob Bluey, host of the Daily Signal podcast. Rob, what do you make of this news of the privatization of the Venezuelan oil sector? And I want to hear about your conversation. You met this week with Maria Corina Machado, who's the head of the opposition there in Venezuela. What do you make of the situation there now with the oil moves and your convo with Machado?
Yeah, Scott, a few things to keep in mind. First of all, Delcy Rodriguez, I think, is trying to do everything in her power to remain in power because she recognizes that President Trump has put some demands on Venezuela. So I'm not necessarily surprised to see that she would go along with the U.S. plan to open up Venezuela to more oil exports. Chevron also came out with record earnings today, as I understand it. They're the one U.S. oil company that is still operating in Venezuela. A lot of those other U.S. companies pulled out because they just felt that it was not sustainable to do so. And so we'll see ultimately whether or not this current regime can remain in power. I'll tell you, in talking to Maria Corina Machado, who is the opposition leader, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who gave her medal to President Trump quite famously, she says that she wants no power sharing agreement. She believes that she is the rightful democratically elected person that should lead that country in the future. And that is a high hurdle, I think, to get past the Trump administration. She was talking to Secretary of State Marco Rubio this week, and I think that, as you heard the president himself say, she might not necessarily have all the support that he thinks she needs in Venezuela, despite the fact that there was widespread corruption under Nicolas Maduro. So I ultimately don't know how this is going to play out, but I think certainly the situation in Venezuela is better today than it was before President Trump took action.
Rob, does Machado believe that she should be installed right now as the president, or does she believe there should be elections first?
Yeah, I think that there has to be an electoral process, and I think she recognizes that that's probably the best situation and the outcome that would certainly benefit her and the people of Venezuela the most. The problem is, like, after operating under the socialist regime for so long and with corruption so rampant in the country and Maduro having stolen the last election, can you have safe and secure elections in the country right now? And I think that that's a question it's hard to answer, but it's a challenge, Scott. It clearly is.
Rob, let's come back to domestic politics. I've been thinking about these so-called affordability Democrats that got elected in November. Mickey Sherrill in New Jersey, Spangenberger in Virginia, and Mamdani in New York City. This week, all three of them did things that had literally nothing to do with affordability. I want to start in Virginia. In fact, the opposite of affordability, where the Virginia Democrats, who swept all the offices and now control the legislature as well, have unveiled this long list of tax increases they plan to inflict upon the people of Virginia. You live out there, I think. Is this the biggest bait and switch of all time? Or, should people have known, like, look, of course they're going to raise your taxes. They're Democrats. How you taking the news of having all your, let's say they're going to raise taxes on leaf blowers, Amazon deliveries, I think even fantasy sports leagues, like everything's getting taxed in Virginia, Rob. Sorry.
Yeah, dog grooming and dog walkers. I mean, my goodness. I mean, that list, I think it was 50. There were 50 things on that list that Democrats have introduced bills to raise taxes on, including the local sales tax, which is going to affect everyone, obviously. Look, I'm not surprised, and I don't think anybody who is probably listening to your show or reading the Daily Signal will be surprised by this news. We knew that Abigail Spanberger would say one thing in front of the cameras and on the debate stage and do something completely different as governor. Quite frankly, that's that was her reputation in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was always portrayed as this moderate, despite the fact that her voting record was to the far left. And so, yes, it's quite ironic that they would run on the issue of affordability and now be in a situation where they're proposing all of these tax increases. And Scott, one other important thing that's not included on that list of 50 tax increases is her decision to re-enter this regional greenhouse gas initiative, which is basically this cap and trade type of system, which is just going to jack up electricity prices for Virginia residents. And Virginia is already dealing with significant electricity demand because it's the number one state for data centers.
Unbelievable. Yeah, everything they're doing over there. Well, I guess the folks of Virginia, you get what you vote for. They'll learn that they have voted for something very terrible, as they will in New Jersey, as they will in New York City. Rob Bluey with the Daily Signal. Thanks for coming by. We'll see you again here in a couple of weeks. We'll take a break, and when we come back, I'm so glad to have this conversation with my friend, the officer, Brandon Tatum, is here. It's common sense. Stay with us.
The very definition of never back down. Here's Scott Jennings.
Friday, January 30th. It's Casual Friday here in the New York studio. Scott Jennings, common sense for the American people. It's time for Friday Punditry. And my guest this week, I'm so excited about this conversation. My buddy, former college football player, former police officer, and now I think one of the most interesting and best content creators in the conservative movement. He is the host of the Officer Tatum Show. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Brandon Tatum here on the Scott Jennings Show. Brandon, my man, good to see you, sir.
Well, Scott Jennings, I feel kind of weird because I'm over here blushing of another man speaking well of me. So I do appreciate it, Scott. I'm not going to lie. Coming from you means more than just about anybody in the world. And I really appreciate all the kind words. And I'm honored to be a part of your show.
Well, I appreciate you, my friend. And the friendship we've struck up has been very special to me. And it's been nice to visit you a couple of times at your headquarters out there in Arizona. And your take, I think, on what's going on in the world is so refreshing. It's a very real world, a very common sense approach, and there's no wonder why people are attracted to it. The way you do it, the way you present yourself, it's very well done. And your voice, I think, has just become so important on the American right. And I want to get your thoughts on some things going on in the news that are really specific, I think, to your background. You were a police officer in Tucson, Arizona, before you got into your current job and profession as being a commentator on the right. And right now in the news, Brandon, we have a bunch of people in this country who are inciting violence and worse against federal and I think also local law enforcement. When you watch what's going on in Minneapolis, when you hear these Democratic officials calling cops Gestapo, calling them the Nazis or worse, when you see these radical agitators in the street, as someone who wore the uniform, how does all this strike you?
Well, it's incredibly frustrating and it's perplexing. I cannot understand for the life of me how grown adults are sitting here advocating for violence or even watching it unfold and not challenging it when they didn't do nothing. When ICE and Border Patrol was doing the same type of a thing under another administration. I cannot believe grown people are crying on television, Scott, crying as if they're just so perplexed that our government is actually following the laws in which we voted for. It's mind-blowing. I don't know if they're evil or stupid or both. It's perplexing to me. And it is frustrating because they act as if the men and women who wear the uniform on the Border Patrol or ICE or even local law enforcement are not also Americans, are not also patriots, do not also believe in the First Amendment, and is sworn to protect and serve with their lives and uphold the Constitution. I don't know where they're getting their reason from, but it's a shame that they're doing law enforcement and men and women who are serving with their lives this way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I want to ask, when you were an officer in Tucson, what kind of interactions did you have with ICE? And also, what kind of enforcement interactions did you have with illegal immigrants? Because I assume they're in Tucson. It was fairly common being close to the border. Give us a little perspective as a former officer about what these law enforcement personnel are going through as they're simply trying to enforce existing federal immigration law.
Well, Scott, when I was a cop, it was very different. Like Chief Villasenor, who was the chief of the Tucson Police Department at the time, we worked together with Border Patrol and ICE to get criminals off the streets. It was very simple. They had the SB 1070 checks. And that means that if we encountered a person who admitted that they were illegally in this country, or they spoke Spanish or could not speak any English and had no documentation, we had the ability to contact Border Patrol or ICE, and they'll run a check and see if that person is someone that they want to talk to. That's it. And if the person were to get arrested for a municipal crime or a crime that was prosecuted by the state, not the federal government, we will take them to the jail and put an ICE hold on them, which means they will remain there until their identity could be verified, so that we made sure this is not a fugitive or somebody wanted for murder somewhere. We had a easy-going relationship. We are also law enforcement officers, even at the municipal level. We don't stop enforcing the law because somebody's illegal alien. We work together with Border Patrol. And it bothers me that, well, I'll put it this way. ICE and Border Patrol are deployed all over the country. Right. We have no issues in 99% of the situations. So other jurisdictions are working with them in a very reasonable and practical way. It's just Minnesota and these sanctuary cities that do not want enforcement of federal law to go on at all. They want illegal aliens to be able to do whatever they want to do, use as much taxpayer dollar, and ultimately be a future voter that they wish that they can lock in with amnesty. And so it's not even about the enforcement perspective, but we worked with Border Patrol all the time, being a border state, and it was a great working relationship. And I'll add this one thing, Scott, is that we knew, and Chief Villasenor knew, that it's better that we get the people off the streets when we first make contact with them or when they get to the jail, so that ICE doesn't have to come into the community and interfere with the day-to-day work that we're trying to do as municipal law enforcement officers.
Well, what you just said is the critical issue. You can either have cooperation in the jail or you got to go get them in the community. And that's the real problem in Minneapolis. There's no cooperation, so you got to chase them down on the streets, which requires a lot more manpower. I want to play for you a clip of the mayor of Minneapolis. His name is Jacob Fry. He's an honorary Somali pirate. Let's play cut 2 about the fact he won't cooperate. Here's Fry.
Define your definition, Mr. Mayor, of what a sanctuary city is and how you feel about sanctuary cities existing in this nation.
Well, there's this terminology around sanctuary city. Put that aside for a second. I'll tell you what we've got in Minneapolis. What we have is something called a separation ordinance. And what the separation ordinance says is that we do not enforce federal immigration law. We do not have our police officers, our public officials working with any federal agency on federal enforcement of immigration law.
Brandon, it sounds to me like the mayor of Minneapolis is perfectly fine if violent, criminal, illegal aliens, some of the worst, drug traffickers, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, gangbangers, are roaming the streets of Minneapolis. It sounds crazy to me.
Scott, that's exactly what he's saying. He's also conflating and trying to gaslight the public. No local or state law enforcement officer has the jurisdiction to enforce federal law. That's not even on the books. He says we're not going to cooperate. There is no necessity to cooperate with federal agents in their enforcement. But when you encounter a person who committed a felony crime and they're illegally in this country, they're not asking you to prosecute them on a federal level. All they're doing is saying, hey, can you notify us that you've captured a guy who's an MS-13 gang member that's an illegal alien in this country? Or when you take him to the jail, can you at least notify us that he's in the jail so we can come get him? He's lying. They're conflating. We never enforce federal law. That's not our jurisdiction or our expectation. But that does not mean that we cannot work with them. The crazy thing is, you see a murderer running down the street and you go, well, he murdered somebody in another jurisdiction, which means across state lines. That makes it a federal crime, and the U.S. Marshals typically will go and get that person. But if I'm a cop and I see the guy, am I going to say, well, that's the U.S. Marshals' job? Because he committed a crime in another state, which I don't have jurisdiction over. No law enforcement officer would do that. Even as a man, if I was on my porch and I saw a man who abused a child come running down the street, and I go, well, I'm not a cop, so I'm not going to get involved. That's how silly he sounds. These people are not mom and pop working at the swap meet or something, and they're going and finding them. These are hardened criminals who have committed crimes against people in the United States of America, which is why we know they exist. If you are illegal alien in this country and you're not doing anything criminal, and we won't even really know you exist, you're kind of flying under the radar. It's the people that go out and they commit felony crimes, or they commit felony crimes in other countries, and the people of that original country want them back for prosecution. That's how ICE gets the information, brings it before a judge, they sign an arrest warrant, and they go and execute a lawful arrest warrant. This is what we see ICE trying to do. But these weirdos that literally want lawlessness in their city is saying, we won't help you at all, and we want crime to be rampant.
Yeah, I don't understand the politics of this, but it's what this radical Democratic base obviously wants right now. Our guest today is the officer, Brandon Tatum. Brandon, I know you have thoughts on this, so I'm just going to tee it up. Don Lemon, former CNN anchor, has been arrested by the feds for busting into a church a couple of Sundays ago, violating people's civil rights there, violating the Federal FACE Act. When you heard Don Lemon had gotten arrested when you woke up this morning, what did you think?
Well, first of all, this is probably the most exciting morning I've ever had in my life, watching this weirdo get arrested for things he should have been arrested for, and his arrogance is what got him, in my personal opinion. So I'm glad to see him go to jail. I'm glad to see, or at least get arrested. I don't know what they're going to do as far as charging, but this guy is a flat-out idiot. And his arrogance is what caused him to go to jail. Because if he was a real journalist, he would have stood outside and interviewed people outside as they leave the church. Instead, he premeditated on camera by joining the protest with foreknowledge that they were going to go and disrupt a church. And he goes in with them and challenges the pastor. He didn't ask him a question. He challenged him and critiqued him and chastised him. That's not journalism. And then when he's asked to leave, at least if you're a journalist, you would study law. If you go into a building, it doesn't matter if you're a journalist or not. If it's a private facility and they ask you to leave, which is a reasonable request to leave, you have to, or you are committing a crime. If you are part of disorderly conduct and you are, knowingly and intentionally being a part of that, that is a crime. But he goes even further because these people intentionally attacked a church and he knew about it. And this is the reason why he got charged with some of the charges that he did. Conspiracy to deprive rights and also the violation of the FACE Act. And I'm glad that they're taking this stuff seriously because it's not right to do this at any religious facility. I don't care if it was a mosque. You don't do this at someone's place of worship. It's not right.
One good rule of being a criminal, don't film your crimes and then put them out on the internet is one possible rule. That's Brandon Tatum is our guest. We're going to have more with Brandon when we come back. First, a quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. I want to share a quick story from our buddy Rod in Texas. He sent us a letter and said, I'm 64. I used to build houses. Years of hard physical work left me with excruciating back pain. It was unbearable. I finally gave Relief Factor a try. Within 4 days, most of that pain had subsided. Over the next few weeks, it is continuing to improve. Being pain-free is indescribable. That's what Rod from Texas has to say. I think you would find a similar experience if you tried Relief Factor's 3-week quick start. See how it works for you. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. Ask yourself, how would it feel to be out of pain? You might get the answer if you try Relief Factor. More with the Officer Brandon Tatum. We'll ask him who won the week when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Ready for some common sense and a little Kentucky windage? Here's Scott Jennings.
Friday, January 30th, home stretch, and big conversation today with my friend, the Officer Brandon Tatum is here. Brandon, one of the things I admire about what you're doing is not just the content that you're creating, but you have a whole ethos of entrepreneurship in your building there. When I visited you guys have got, I know people see the podcast and they see the content you're creating, but there's all kinds of stuff going on in the Brandon Tatum world. You've got energy drink that you're promoting. You started a company called Blackline Security Operations. Tell me a little bit about the business side of Brandon Tatum and what you have going on out there in Scottsdale.
Well, thank you, Scott, for asking that question. I mean, I consider myself to be a serial entrepreneur. When God created man, he created us in his image and likeness. And I believe that us being creators and visionaries and stuff is all a part of God's creation for us. And so when I look at business, I look at business the same way. Whatever I can imagine that I think could benefit people and change the world, I want to get involved and do it. And so we do tons of different things here. Like we literally got an energy drink, a sleep drink. All of our staff uses it. We have a bourbon company that we just started called Verdict Bourbon. I have a security company. We have a nonprofit that's associated with the security company. I have a print shop and a distribution center. And all of those things are what I would consider to be passion projects for me, that gives me the ability to control, I could say, fair, affordable products and services for conservatives and people who are reasonable. And I'm just blessed to be able to do it. And so I appreciate you, throwing it out there because I do more than just talk. I do a lot of business leadership and I own a couple companies as well.
Yeah, when I met with you out in your headquarters, I was so impressed and amazed by you, but also by your team. You get all these folks working for you out there doing different aspects of your businesses. It was a really impressive operation. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that with us. Brandon, you are our Pundit of the Week, and it is tradition here on Friday Punditry that we ask our Pundit of the Week to tell us who won the week in America. American politics or American culture in general. So, Brandon Tatum, who won this week?
Well, it took a while for me to think of this person. I think this person is probably one of the greatest people that I've seen in the last, I don't know, several years, and that is the one and only Scott Jennings. You are the winner. I'm telling you, I looked, and I'm unbiased. I looked and I said, who won the week? And I see you every single day on there doing the Lord's work. I do not know how you do it, Scott, listening to these lunatics. And I'm saying it, not you. They're great people to you. They're lunatics to me. I saw Ana Navarro, I think she was on the show when she said that Alex Pretty was somebody that you want to marry your daughter. And he's a role model for everybody. I could not believe it. I could not believe that people get on there and say that. But I'm telling you, Scott, if you weren't there, not only giving the truth and the voice of reason, but you do it with decorum, professionalism, and with humility, our country would be dead. They with no impunity. They literally get on there and say the wildest and craziest and nonsensical things that I've ever heard in my life. And it's always come back to you where you go, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, here is the reality and common sense. So without buttering your toast too much, I think, Scott Jennings, you are the winner of the week.
All right. Well, you're officially invited back for every Friday for Friday Punditry, Brandon. I appreciate that. So you pick the winner. It's my job to pick the loser. I considered Don Lemon. I considered Tim Walz. I considered Cuba. I considered the Hall of Fame voters who snubbed Bill Belichick. But I think I'm going to go with Stephen Colbert. Let's play Stephen Colbert, who said on his show this week, well, you got to hand it to the Nazis. Here's Stephen Colbert.
Bavino went on complaining. Look, Dana, they're trying to portray Border Patrol agents and ICE agents as Gestapo, Nazi, and many other words.
Yes, do not compare ICE or Border Patrol agents to the Nazis. That's an unfair comparison. The Nazis were willing to show their faces.
Stephen Colbert, ultimately the least funny and most useless comedian in America, even more useless than Jimmy Kimmel, Brandon, but he is my absolute loser of the week. Brandon Tatum, you've been great. Thanks for coming by. I will see you in Arizona, I think, in a few weeks. I can't wait to see you again. I know you got a new ride. We're going to take a ride together. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll have a great conversation. That was Brandon Tatum. I'm Scott Jennings. The week is over. Enjoy the weekend. See you Monday. Common sense.